Hello and welcome to Light Reading's Leaders in Sustainability series. I'm Sue Marek and I'm here with Tim Pennell, who is the Senior Director of Product Management at Juniper Networks. Hi, Tim. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Sue. Happy to be here.
Great. So, Tim, let's talk a little bit about Juniper's Cloud Metro. It's considered a new approach to traditional metro networks. Can you kind of explain that and kind of tell me about what's new with Cloud Metro?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with what we consider to be the drivers for Cloud Metro before jumping into the new concepts we introduced. So at Juniper, we believe the future of networking is all about experience. If you think about users who are demanding more than ever from their networks, whether that's lower latencies, quicker response times, or higher quality, rich media, innovative applications like augmented and virtual reality, the metaverse, if you like, or for business users like ourselves, we want an assured and secure experience from wherever we're choosing to connect to our corporate networks and to each other. So if we think about Metro then, and then where we've come from, access aggregation, so your basic bit pipe connectivity, we're seeing a lot of change in that segment of the market. From a pure growth perspective, I think we're talking about 500% growth in traffic capacity up until 2027. So around about a 30% CAGR in terms of the growth. We're seeing a lot of services getting distributed into the metro. So things like content caching, IP peering distribution, edge compute, essentially cloud connectivity, pushing all the way close to those end users. And then across all of that, quality of experience is mattering more and more. So, from the aspects of the services, things like the lower latency and the like. So effectively what you have is the metro network becoming like the new edge. What used to be the springboard for services delivery in the past, further back in with our Ethernet services edge routers, this is now shifting down into the metro. And the future for metro in our view at Juniper was really centering around taking that new scenario of everything pushing down there and then trying to reduce complexity and also increase trust within that network. And to do so at the same time as achieving a good experience for those, the best possible experience for those end users using the network, but also the network operators who are keeping those networks up and healthy for those end users. So that's the situation we have. And if you sort of take that scenario and those requirements together, we felt it required a fundamentally new approach. And we at Juniper termed this the Cloud Metro. This is not a Juniper thing. This is an industry thing. A lot of the changes and trends I talked about, these are not things that has been driven specifically by Juniper. This is just things we've observed in the way that the industry has been evolving over the last several years. So if you look at how Cloud Metro is distinct from traditional Metro of the past, there's really three key areas that we talk about. Operations, so how the network's operated, the systems that the network is made up of, and the architectures that we use. From an operations perspective, if you think about the traditional network, Metro, it was fundamentally something that was very much focused on devices, on manual operations. Fundamentally, everybody had a do-it-yourself approach to operations, and that was different from one operator to the next. There was not a lot of reuse of the operations piece. The Cloud Metro approach is really shifting that focus to end-user service experiences and to experiences of the operations team, as I mentioned, and leveraging cloud-delivered automation, including private cloud in there to cover on-premise needs. And this is AI enabling and benefiting from collective intelligence across multiple operators. Similarly, if you look at it from a sort of an architecture perspective, traditional metro networks, a very simple traffic pattern, north to south, very, very common with sort of ring-based architectures with, a dual hub on your Ethernet services router. Network silos were very common in those networks. So your business network, your consumer broadband network, mobility networks, all completely separate, effectively an overbuild of networks. So going forwards, what we see is the sort of evolving trend. So again, still physically rings, but seeing more scale out architectures. So that leaf spine scale out architecture is really inherited from data centers. Delivering that practically in some networks is difficult if you think about it from a physical perspective, but if you think about it from a logical perspective, that's what we're seeing being built out. And really from a sustainability perspective, something that is not separate networks, but converged. So using things like network slicing to differentiate between services rather than an overbuild of different networks. So as a whole, if you also look about things like power efficiency, platform longevity, all of these things that come into sustainability, sustainability is a very broad term, but if we look about those things, again, we need to design something from the ground up that's designed for that, better sustainability and longevity, meeting not just today's needs, both from a capacity and functional perspective, but also looking towards growth and enhancements much longer into the future. Again, we're pushing a lot of functionality down into the metro that was traditionally in the edge or in cloud. And again, you've got to have, therefore, more intelligence built into the platforms in a way that we had never done before in traditional metro. Simple aggregation platforms is what we're using because of that level of service distribution that you're pushing down there. And so fundamentally, all of these things together, a lot of new in there. And we thought, okay, there's so much difference in all of these three areas that we need to perhaps coin a different term to describe what we're seeing in the industry. And that was Cloud Metro.
I see. So you touched on, sustainability a little bit, and you talked about how, but let's kind of drill down and get a little more specific. So why is sustainability so important in metro networks, and why are operators concerned about this now?
I think so. First of all, let's kind of, again, a little sort of a step back. So when we talk to service providers, this is a common set of challenges that they were dealing with, whether it was the growth or increasing traffic demands, things like unexpected service interruptions, an increase in cyber security threats that they're dealing with. But underlying, a lot of what we were talking about to them was what we believe to be probably the major challenge that every service provider or network operator was dealing with, and that was this operational complexity. So operational complexity that was slowing down their innovation, preventing them from focusing on advancing a lot of their strategic imperatives. Now, you can say that these operational challenges are, common probably throughout all parts of the network, but it's particularly true for metro networks, probably for two reasons. One is if you compare to, for example, the core or the traditional edge that we've seen, you've got orders of magnitude more platforms that you're deploying and operating in the metro network. So whereas you may have 10 core nodes, you can have thousands, or even in some cases tens of thousands of nodes that you're dealing with in the metro network. So it's just those orders of scale. And again, some of the things I've just talked about in terms of the rate of change, in terms of what we're doing in the metro network, those services being pushed out there and how those services are being delivered, complex service change, hybrid cloud environments, and also that growth of traffic that's driving the need to automate as much as we can. All of these things are highest in metro networks, and that's why in metro networks, especially, sustainability and everything around that becomes more and more key.
Okay, so let's now talk. So you've talked a little bit about why sustainability is important, and you did touch on in the earlier question about how these how the Cloud Metro solution improves sustainability. But let's get really specific, because I think, I heard some things like, removing the silos and things like that make it more, more sustainable, or how it improves sustainable. So can you be more specific?
Indeed, there are, when you think about the word sustainability, it can conjure up so many different aspects. when we were looking at if you like the problem statement, and we were asking, okay, how can operators achieve sustainability moving forward with the traditional metro designs and approaches? And we were sort of thinking, okay, if capacity is going to grow by 500% by 2027, what does that mean with today's approach? And essentially, you've got that kind of time and effort, money spent upgrading the network repeatedly, this approach, that sort of rip and replace approach every 3 to 5 years, whether that's just due to capacity or it's an inability of the platforms initially deployed to support evolving network needs. Things like segment routing, V6, for example, is a very common one that's been driving network changes increasingly in recent years. And just this kind of, if you like, constant churn of the network from a sustainability perspective, and into that we sort of throw, well, okay, carbon footprint. When you have that sort of model, it's not something that is very sustainable, right? So you're using and throwing away a lot of components. You're using a lot of resources from the company, both in people and spend, to do these replacements. And so we said, okay, if we got that sort of scenario, how can we have something that is actually able to stay in the network as a platform for much longer without so much churn? So that's basically got to look after not just the growth of traffic, but also those future requirements and be able to support those. So that's puts one set of requirements onto the cloud metro. And then increasingly, operators can't manage those evolving and increasing end user expectations in terms of quality and uptime and latency and the like, if they're always focusing on just sustaining the basic operation and running of the infrastructure itself. And again, the sad reality is that cyber threats will continue to rise. So as part of sustainability, integrated security is also paramount for Cloud Metro. Another aspect of sustainability, we talk to top executives in the telecoms industry, and retention of skilled operating staff. So retention, not just recruiting, but retention of those staff was a top care about. Particularly as we go into sort of more AI and automations, the skill set is changing, but even just retaining the staff is a top care about. So we did start looking at, okay, how can we make that shift from the old world of manual operations, okay, where you have a lot of staff basically just repeating the same thing. As networks get more complex, spending more time to remediate issues, how can we move to a new automated operations model with Cloud Metro? Thinking about automated operations and about predictive operations as well, allowing those people effectively to move up the stack, if you like, and add more value to the business, helping on the retention, offloading the repetitive, less interesting stuff, aspects of the job. I think, gosh, another sustainability perspective, we have to talk about it, right? So you've got those national imperatives for greenhouse gas emissions, companies around the world, including ourselves, right, taking a leadership posture in terms of when we're going to be carbon neutral and driving towards that. And of course, from a Juniper perspective, a lot of the value we can add as a company and similar for vendors like ourselves is about the green credentials of the products that we're delivering. But yeah, we see a lot of drive towards this in the standards as well. So I think it's a general industry thing that we're moving towards sustainability of the planet, right? That is not just separate from, but is intrinsically linked to the technology and the business itself and what we're trying to drive. So this also has to be a factor that you build into your Cloud Metro solution is, okay, sustainability and green aspects. What does that look like? The easy one that people look at is, okay, we have box A from vendor A and box B from vendor B, and if you play the game at a box by box level, which is typically the way we've done it, you say, okay, this box is consuming this much power, and if you even go a little bit broader than that, this box has got, this much carbon footprint. And increasingly we're seeing asks from our customers to, okay, what's the carbon footprint of this box? But that's a very box-centric view of things. And the reality is that, yes, but if, for example, box B has got much better, let's pick an example, service scale, okay? So if you're delivering a certain number of services in a metro area, and it's not just about capacity, it's about service density, then box B, you may only need one of them, but box A, which only scales perhaps to 1/8 of the service level, you need to stack 8 of those. They may have 10% better power, but you've just now put 8 of them. So all of those sort of aspects, and so things like service scale, we also looked at, as well as the product architectures and things like that, for how you optimize power with the latest generations of silicon and things like that. Moore's law helps us as we go along. All of those things are wrapped around as part of, okay, how do you build an efficient, green, sustainable infrastructure? And also, how is that operated in a sustainable way?
You talked a little bit about, automation. Let's drill down more on the role automation plays in improving sustainability. You talked a little bit about staff requirement, but can you be a little more specific?
Yeah. So again, we talk about experiences, right? And yes, it's not just the experiences of those end users from a service perspective, but also for the network operations staff. And so it drove us really to focus on cloud-delivered automation, AI-enabled automation, to both assure services, but also security, to do things like accelerating time to remediation, the AI providing insights that just weren't possible previously from a human manual operations perspective. So a lot of that with Cloud Metro, yes, it's about service experience and it's about operations experience. And as I mentioned earlier, the scale of metro networks, the rate of change, increasing levels of complexity in delivering services involving slicing or service chaining across hybrid cloud infrastructures makes this AI-enabled automation particularly important in Cloud Metro. It just becomes a much more complex environment, and we need tools to help us. So if I talk a little bit about how specifically we're implementing this and why we're kind of going the way we do. So the Paragon platform that we have in Juniper, which is our automation as a service platform. And one of the things that we're doing differently here that some people looked at is that we and kind of scratch their head why they're doing this is we moved very quickly to the cloud. So we talk about a cloud first approach, not a cloud only approach, right? We still have on-prem needs for security reasons and various other reasons, but it's a cloud first approach. And then if you want an on-prem, it's effectively a private cloud. And there's a number of reasons we did this. First of all, if you look at multiple different implementations and also analyst surveys, you see a lot of the do-it-yourself operations and automation implementations that we've had network operators do so far. A lot of those have failed, and even those that succeeded, we had very elongated programs. So we wanted to give a little bit more of a value add in that perspective, and really getting in a position where we can basically say to customers, just hey, we have something pre-baked, pre-delivered. You can log on to it and see it, experience it before you perhaps deploy in your own on-prem environment. And like I said, it's gaining insights that you don't see from problems that you've perhaps not experienced yet in your network, but your peers have already experienced. So you start to get more predictive around finding problems and more proactive in terms of reaching out and saying, hey, here's something going on that you might want to take action on before it impacts the services. And again, that comes to the end user experience side of things, so the network uptime and things like that. So we wanted to revolutionize what it meant to deliver good service experience across a metro network, and that was part of the Cloud Metro offering. I think the other piece that was kind of part of that automation, the Paragon Active Assurance piece that we call it, that was through acquisition of a company called NetRounds. And really what we're doing here is embedding essentially test agents into the network, and the network itself then becomes an active sensor for service monitoring and service assurance, and that's all tied into the automation side of things. So it's service level awareness and monitoring of everything: voice, video, web, DNS, VPN, you name it, right? And the network itself is acting as if it were an end user, generating, monitoring real synthetic traffic that's following the same data plane and paths as the actual user traffic, and giving you that end-to-end assurance of the service linked into the cloud automation as a service. And similarly for security, talking about that, again, coupling that to the automation system, pairing everything together and giving basically a security attestation, monitoring and assurance solution as part of that Paragon automation. So in summary, kind of resetting the baseline for that IP services fabric that everything's built on, giving you assurance and security across that, as well as the operations side of things. So very important in metro networks, just because of the scale and change and complexity that's being introduced here. Automation has a bigger and bigger role to play, and the AI aspects of that just give us that ability to be a little bit more proactive, and also to solve a lot of the complex issues that really the current tools just don't give us that ability to do.
Great. Thank you, Tim, for joining me today. This was really helpful. Appreciate your explanation of Cloud Metro.
You're most welcome.